celebrate community media and to coming back into reality from the last 2 weeks as we call it, breaking with convention, war, peace, and the presidency. Covering the Democratic and Republican conventions inside and out. Oh wait, I forgot. So you can't do anything at these conventions without your It's funny how something can be gold one day and worth nothing the next. But this is what allowed us to go onto the convention floor, interview senators, presidents, vice presidents, whoever. And just to give you a sense of these celebrations of democracy. Let's see, my lanyard that they give you, that you're supposed to wear with your credential, has AT&T logo on it. And that's, I think, extremely significant. It matched our, I don't have it here, I forgot to bring it in, the delegates' bags and the reporters' bags. I think about thousands and thousands of them. But they've got an AT&T logo on both sides. And I think back to 2008 to the Democratic Convention. And when we first flew into Denver, one of the first parties was thrown by AT&T for the Democratic delegates. Now, it's very relevant to what you're doing here, because it's these telecoms that are among the most powerful lobbying forces in Washington. You know, the AT&Ts and the Verizons. And, in the December before the 2008 election, you may remember at that time that AT&T, Verizon, and other telecoms were implicated in spying on American people, on American citizens. And legislation was introduced to grant them retroactive immunity. And President, the time Senator Obama, put on his website that he would not only not support this, but he would filibuster this. And as the time rolled around to vote on these, which was around the end of the spring, leading into the Democratic convention, he not only didn't filibuster, but he voted for the legislation. And within a week, we saw the prototype bags, delegates' bags, that were known to all the Democrats, and they had an AT&T logo emblazoned on both sides of those bags. So AT&T threw the Democrats a wonderful thank you party as they came into Denver. And these parties matter. Something interesting goes on there. You've got the young legislators, state council members who come in from around the country, and it's a kind of a acculturation process where they're learning how politics works in this country. In some cases, at these parties, you have more lobbyists than delegates. And you come in, they give you swag bags, and sometimes they show you prototypes of legislation. You know, they might find out you're a state legislator, you know, if you need any help in designing a bill, and you could be the co-sponsor or the sponsor of your own bill, we'll help you write it. And you know the results of that at the national level when the lobbyists write the legislation. Particularly when it comes to the internet, we have to be so careful that these large corporations don't write the legislation, which so often their fingerprints are all over. That would privatize the internet. The internet can be the greatest democratizing force. It allows us to horizontally communicate with people around the world. All the public resources that put into developing the internet, now when it's so clearly the channel of communication of the future, corporations want to privatize it and reap the profits and really shut down a lot of the democratic communication so that you could have a Dalit women website in India that you hit and it just doesn't come up, or Democracy Now! Maybe takes 10 minutes, but you go to google.com and it's right there. And you start to get this 2, 3, 4 tiered system, and we have to completely fight against that and be extremely vigilant, because so often legislators, state senators, congress members, senators don't even understand what the legislation is that they have been handed. Some do understand it very well, but they're also waiting to get something else handed to them. And we watched that take place and tried to follow money as we went to the Republican and Democratic conventions. But just to continue with my bag, this happens to be with my credential, the one for the Democratic convention, but they're similar for the Republicans. So my AT&T lanyard, and then this says, this is for Thursday. It was supposed to be outside at the Bank of America Stadium. And on the other side, it talks about, well, as Dennis said, the Time Warner Cable Arena, which is where it ultimately took place because of the weather. Bank of America Stadium, though, wasn't used. It was quite remarkable to see the Democrats simply rename it for the week Panther Stadium. Now, when we were following the protests last Sunday, I kept asking people, what is that place over there that said Bank of America Stadium? I said, what's that called? And they would say, Bank of America Stadium. I would ask the police, what's that called? They'd say, Bank of America Stadium. But the Democrats were calling it Panther Stadium because they understood the significance, the metaphor that this presented, that President Obama would be giving his second address, acceptance speech, in a stadium whose naming rights was bought by this major financial institution. These financial institutions that have brought this country almost to ruin, as serious as 75 years ago with the Depression. We have never faced something so serious as we're facing today. And instead of taking, the Citibanks and the Goldman Sachs and the Bank of Americas to task, investigating them, instead they're arresting the people who protest this government corporate collusion that have left so many people in this country in ruin. So we cover the conventions inside and out. And at the Democratic convention this week, the first day we followed the protesters. Well, let me go to the Republican convention, because remember, Hurricane Isaac was about to hit Tampa. And on Monday, about 500 protesters came out to protest the Republican agenda. And there were a number of Republican tweets that were swirling around, like, the organizers said there would be thousands. How pathetic. There's only 500. It wasn't enormous. There was not an enormous amount of protesters. But I couldn't help but think 50,000 people had come into Tampa for the Republican convention on Monday. And they canceled the convention because of the rain. So they didn't even manage to show up.